Hope everybody is having fun. We are underway with the summer. And why is Liv Morgan the perfect SmackDown Women's Champion right now? Why is it working so well? In a world full of cynics, in a world full of people that are smarter, in a world full of fans, I should say, that are smarter, quote unquote, than the people who write the show. Why is Liv Morgan the good guy who gets cheered wherever she goes? It is impossible to not like Liv Morgan. And I think that the reason that it's impossible to not like Liv Morgan is because it comes across as authentic. As much as you look at Ronda Rousey and assume that she's a villain, you look at Liv Morgan and you want to cheer for her. Liv Morgan has an innate likability. Liv Morgan has an innate relatability. You cannot look at Liv Morgan and go, that looks like somebody I don't want to support. So from the jump, from the first time you see her, you go, yeah, there's something about her face. The way she'll laugh in the ring and then put the serious face back on. The way she'll look, like the emotions on her face when she comes to the ring, she holds up the title and it looks like she's really taking in the reaction the audience is giving her. It looks like this is really her dream being played out in front of our eyes. The whole Liv Morgan character appears to just be Liv Morgan. And they say that every great wrestling character is just yourself turned up to 11. But it's rare that it's not a character. The Mankind character might have been Mick Foley turned up to 11, but Mankind is still this character. Stone Cold Steve Austin is Steve Austin turned up to 11, but it's still Stone Cold Steve Austin. He's a character. You can define it. Go down the list. Ronda Rousey. You can define these characters and who they are and what motivates them. But Liv Morgan is the best of us in the audience. We get Liv Morgan because she comes across like us. And most of us, and this is one of the benefits that people don't talk about. You know, it's very easy to find the negative parts of the fact that WWE likes making superstars out of people who have never wrestled before. Likes finding people at their infancy stage and creating WWE superstars out of them. That's something that they're criticized for all the time. Except it's not brought up when you look at the landscape and you see Roman Reigns is the biggest star in wrestling, and you see John Cena, and you see all these people. And I know that John Cena wrestled a little bit before WWE, but he was hardly an indie sensation. These are people that were molded and crafted within the WWE developmental system, the Batistas, the Randy Ortons, the Liv Morgans. What's really great about the developmental system and about taking somebody from scratch and building them into a superstar is that every now and then, we, the audience, get to see the journey. Those of us who have been watching for years and paying attention to everything get rewarded when we watch these people take on the position that we feel like they were born to take on, and we see the growth. We get to see the growth happen right in front of our faces, and that is the story of Liv Morgan. You know, very important to the Liv Morgan character and the way the audience perceives her, I think, is the Liv Morgan documentary. Live Through This, or what I think it was Live Through This, that they put up on the WWE network. It's now available on Peacock. They moved it right to the front section. And it is, I mean, that if John Carlo has a legacy in the WWE for the time that he spent there making documentaries and videos and stuff like that, I think the Liv Morgan doc is it. That's the piece. It's different from any other doc that's on that documentary. It's honest and it's raw, and it's honest and raw about Liv, and it's honest and raw about the WWE and the way Liv has to exist within this very real life system. There is very little when you look at Liv on screen that separates her from what you perceive her real life to be. If you see Liv out on the street, if you see Liv leaving her hotel, if you see Liv in the parking lot of an arena after a show, even if you've been watching wrestling for 20 years and you know it all, you read every dirt sheet, you still kind of assume that the Liv Morgan that you just saw in that arena or the Liv Morgan that you watch on TV is the same person that you may be able to interact with on the street, and that's very, very rare in wrestling. Liv showed up on NXT TV over a year after getting to the PC. You know, she was brought in after just training. Like she was training at DeFranco's gym, and WWE found out about her. She got a tryout, she got a deal, and she started training to become a professional wrestler within the WWE system. After a year and change, she ended up on NXT TV. And then after almost 2 years, she became somewhat of a regular on NXT TV. Wasn't one of the top women. Wasn't an NXT Women's Champion. But moved on to the main roster as a surprise, really, for most of us. 3 years after getting signed. So from the time she was signed to the time she was on the main roster, it was 3 years. And that's really, I think, people knew of Liv as somebody that was in developmental and somebody that was in NXT. But I think that people really got to know her as a character when she showed up with the Riott Squad on SmackDown after, it was either SummerSlam or WrestleMania, but regardless, I think it was after SummerSlam, about 3 years after she signed her deal with the WWE. And this says all you need to know, Liv, by the way, even in the Riott Squad, was portrayed as kind of the rough around the edges, young up-and-comer, Sarah Logan was the blunt force object. She was the brutality of the group, the enforcer, if you will. Ruby Riott was the one that felt like she was earmarked to be a top dog someday in the WWE Women's Division because of the, years and years that she had under her belt in the world of independent wrestling. And Liv Morgan was kind of the wild card kid sister of the group. But there's just something about, and she looked totally different, right? You see Ruby Riott, and she's all tatted up, and she's punk rock to the core. You see Sarah Logan, and you can already sense the Viking that exists within inside of her. But you could see a world where Ruby Riott and Sarah Logan would hang out together. Liv Morgan doesn't necessarily seem like she would have rolled with that clique. But there was an instant chemistry that existed between those three. There's almost this positivity, right? This optimism that is radiating off of Liv Morgan that we all see, It wasn't long into the Riott Squad's run in the WWE that we found out that all three of them had gotten the date that they debuted on the main roster tattooed to their bodies. I believe Liv's is on her neck. That's what a fan she is. As a fan, we think about how amazing it would be to get to live our dream. How amazing it would be to step into a WWE ring, into a WWE arena, just to be a whatever little part of the show that we could be. I know I still feel that way. And you wonder if the superstars that you're cheering for are in touch with that, if they feel that way at all. And to know that one of them tattooed their debut date to their skin because it was that meaningful to them, that's an instant, oh, they're like me. The Riott Squad goes through and after a run of about a year and a half, they break up. This, to me, was the real, true beginning of the support for Liv Morgan. The Riott Squad was very popular. And people loved seeing, because the characters of all three women radiated off of all of them. All of them had a different type of likability. All of them had a different type of thing that you wanted to support. But there was just something different about Liv. There's something that connected with the audience that was different. Honestly, I think And the WWE has keyed in on that. The WWE has figured that out and has made it so that is who Liv is. Liv is her relatability. Liv is her likability. I think Paul Heyman might have been the first person to really zero in on that, but we'll get there. Because the Riott Squad came in, and I mean, they were like an old school faction. Not only did they get tattooed together, they went to the ring together, they got changed together, they traveled together, they made towns together, they did everything together, they did appearances together. Inside the ring, outside of the ring, it was the Riott Squad. And again, this is something when you feel like what you're seeing on screen translates to off screen, your feelings are upped by 200%. When you feel like the thing that you're supporting on screen is similar to it off screen, your support goes through the roof. And so people who supported the Riott Squad, when they realized that the Riott Squad was not just an act on television, that they rolled together no matter what, that support went through the roof. And so when the Riott Squad broke up, for no apparent reason, there was a backlash. And it wasn't against the performers. That was the beginning of this backlash against, like, why are you doing this? Why are you taking this from us? And the rare times that you would see Liv on TV, it really has... Liv has never come across... Wow. I'll get there. The Riott Squad broke up, and they drafted Liv to SmackDown. So Sarah and Ruby stayed on Raw, and Liv went to SmackDown by herself. Liv had never existed in a main roster locker room by herself, and everybody knew this, right? Everybody meaning the fans. So they're all anxious. Everybody's anxious to say, why? Why would this have happened? We were all enjoying the Riott Squad. Why was the Riott Squad broken up? Why is Liv being moved to SmackDown? Well, I guess there must be something big coming for Liv Morgan on SmackDown, right? 3 months go by. 3 months, a quarter of a year goes by, and Liv Morgan isn't even referenced on SmackDown. There is no Liv Morgan to be seen. She's not injured. She's not anywhere. She's just not on the show. Randomly, one episode of SmackDown, Liv shows up during a town hall meeting, and she tells Charlotte that women like her, being Charlotte, are the reason that women like Liv don't get the opportunities that they deserve. And the only problem with that was that a lot of fans felt it was true. That fans were ready to feel a refresh. Fans were ready for something new. The NXT original 4 horsewomen came over and revolutionized women's wrestling in the WWE at WrestleMania 32. It was almost like starting from scratch, the work that these women from NXT did. But by the time we got to Charlotte running SmackDown and Liv Morgan, after 3 months finally showing up, people were ready for the women's division to start to look different. People were ready for new stars to pop up in that women's division. And the thought that it could be Liv Morgan got people super excited. Liv Morgan is the living incarnation of something new. Liv Morgan looks like a refresh. To see Liv Morgan there after 3 months of not being on TV, still feeling optimistic, still coming across as spunky, bright pink hair slapping you in the face, challenging Charlotte to a match, yeah, it was exciting. Charlotte beats her in the main event of that episode of SmackDown, same show, which is fine. Of course, it's Charlotte. And Liv grabs the mic, and she promises a change. She says the real Liv Morgan, when she will be back. And when she's back, it'll be the real Liv Morgan. And you know what happens after that? Another 3 months go by. And this is where the documentary really, really comes into play. Because fans were already going like, why the starts and stops on Liv Morgan are so dramatic. We want this person to succeed so much. And it's not even like she's going out there and failing. She's just not there. She's not on television at all for no apparent reason. And then the worst fear of Liv Morgan fans is confirmed when they turn on this documentary and they see that Liv Morgan, halfway through that 3-month hiatus, the second 3-month hiatus, not the first, the second 3-month hiatus, halfway through that, she's getting ready to have a dark match. And maybe 30 seconds, maybe less. She's in gorilla position. She's in her gear. She's literally waiting for the ring announcer to announce her name. And she finds out that her match is canceled. And you can see it in her face. She's crushed. Anybody can understand. Pro wrestlers are human beings. Sports entertainers are also human beings. The idea of hitting that high and hitting that low within seconds of each other is so much for a person to handle. The idea that you're sitting there and you've been off TV for 3 months and you're like, oh my God, because when you're not on TV, you have to be thinking, is it because of something I did? Am I not as good as I thought I was? Are they getting ready to fire me? Are they do, all these terrible things. I mean, it's just all it is free time for every negative thought that you have in your head to haunt you. And then you get on TV and you get in this top spot that leads you to the main event of SmackDown against Charlotte. And you're like, oh, okay, I was being crazy before. Obviously, I'm in a good position. Obviously, there's a faith in me. They got something planned for me. And then, boom, you get hit again. You're not on TV with no sign of change in sight. And you're like, wait, I don't understand. Why did that last thing happen? Was that a fluke? Am I okay, I got a match. Okay, we got a dark match. Okay, that means probably maybe I'll do a dark match tonight. They'll see that I'm still good. And then next week I'll be on the TV show. And then right before you go out, no, this isn't happening. And then it's like, oh, and you hear it in the documentary. She goes, but you know what? They said it was because I'm supposed to be reinventing myself and they didn't want to put me in front of a crowd before I have fully, reinvented myself, before that television sort of, announcement and visibility has been on display. And while that's true, and I'm sure it is true, I'm sure that is the reason, it makes perfect sense. The idea that message didn't get relayed until, 5 seconds before she went out there. But this is what makes Liv Morgan special. This is what makes Liv Morgan relatable. Is that she didn't go, well, this is what they said, but why didn't they tell me earlier? And they got to stop jerking me around. And they got to, she goes, oh, but you know what? That probably means that they still got stuff in mind for me. That's good. I'm going to take it as a positive and I'm going to keep rolling. If we could all be a little bit more like that, less in our feelings, less letting every negative thought haunt us, and more, okay, well, I'm going to keep rolling. I'm going to keep doing what I do, and I'm going to keep going to practice and getting better because maybe it's a positive. Instead of it's probably a negative, go, maybe it's a positive and keep it moving. And that's what Liv did. But she didn't end up back on SmackDown, and another 3 months after losing to Charlotte, it's announced in the draft that she's going to Monday Night Raw. And graphic comes up with her face and everything. And you're like, we never even got it never went anywhere. Why did that never go anywhere? Why did the breakup of the Riott Squad never go anywhere? Why did the return of Liv Morgan never go anywhere? And then she gets drafted to Raw in October. Another 2 months go by before Liv Morgan vignettes start playing. Liv doesn't show up until the end of December. So listen to this. Right after WrestleMania, with the Riott Squad gets broken up. She goes to SmackDown by herself. 3 months, nothing. Then has one match. Then another 3 months of nothing. And then gets drafted to Raw. We see a graphic of her. And then 2 months of nothing. That's 8 months. One match on television in 8 months. From WrestleMania to taking the next 8 months off, save for one night. And she's not getting bitter, and she's not on Twitter, and she's not doing interviews, and she's not doing any of this stuff. She's putting her nose down, and she's working. So that every time we see her, she will be better. And then she shows up to Raw, and she does the bit with Lana. And when Paul Heyman describes it in the documentary, you kind of get what he's saying more. He's saying that he looked at young women who might be watching the product, who might not be watching the product. He looks at people like his own daughter and realized that the one thing that they hate is labels. This wasn't about Liv Morgan coming out. This was about Liv Morgan being part of portraying the generation that she is a part of and not wanting to be labeled. And that's why she comes out in the middle of this big wedding angle. And the angle itself, the segment of television, is an incredible segment of television. I said it when it first happened, and I will always say it. It was an incredible and effective segment of television. It's one of the great WWE weddings. It didn't go anywhere, but it's one of the great WWE weddings. And the fact that it didn't go anywhere, it leads to more of that underground swelling of support for Liv Morgan. She comes out. She says that Lana was once the love of her life. Everybody's shocked. She interferes in the wedding. But then, after the wedding, over the course of about a month, she has 2 matches with Lana. She beats her both times. It's never really explained when, how, if, why. And it just kind of goes away. You had this big thing, and then it just kind of drops. Liv starts a rivalry with Ruby Riott. And it's fine. But you're almost like, it almost feels like, I guess, they're both here now. I think by this point, Sarah's gone or she's about to be gone. But I guess they're both here, right? And then we enter into the pandemic period. And that's when the Riott Squad get back together as a tag team. We've got Ruby and Liv Morgan back together, and they're a big act during the pandemic period. They start a rivalry with the Iconics. They're drafted to SmackDown, but they never win the Women's Tag Team Championship. And Ruby, a year later, after they reunite, ends up getting released from the WWE. So now we're back to the place we were to begin with. Liv is left on her own. And it's almost like this entire 2 years and change, 2.5 years, has just been this weird spin cycle that as fans, the perception is Liv Morgan has been a victim of. We've been sitting here, right? And we're watching Liv. And we're seeing her grateful. She comes across as grateful for every single opportunity she gets in a WWE ring. And we recognize that as fans. She comes across as somebody who loves this thing that we love. Pro wrestling, sports entertainment, WWE. And we recognize that as fans. We see her getting better when we get to see her. And we recognize that. We see her not getting bitter. We see the sparkle. The fact that the sparkle is still there with all of this that's gone on. The fact that Liv can come out and still be overwhelmed by the reaction. And still have that sense of childlike wonderment. Gosh, oh golly, oh gee, can you believe I'm here? And we believe it because I think it's true. She has every reason in the world at this point to be like, well, I mean, I tried and it didn't work, so forget this. And instead, no, I think I'm going to keep pushing forward. I think I'm going to keep trying because I love this and this is my dream. And we see that as fans. And that becomes the character of Liv Morgan. By the time Ruby goes away and Liv is back to where she started, I don't think Liv is trying to discover who she is anymore. Paul Heyman described her as a young girl with a dream that even she couldn't vocalize, a dream that couldn't possibly make sense to anybody except for her. And although she can't vocalize it, and although I couldn't explain it back to her, in her mind, it's as clear as day. And I think in that 2+ years, that dream started to take shape and take shape and take shape and started to become a reality, and it became contagious. And the WWE universe, the audience, saw it and jumped on board with it. And when we see Liv Morgan come out now, we see her for like the last year or so. We watch her, and again, it's not so much start and stop as it is. First, it looks like we're going somewhere, and then maybe we're not. Then it looks like we're going somewhere, and then maybe not, you know? She got a title match against Becky Lynch. She got one on Raw. She got one at day one. That was great. But then, she joins Rhea Ripley. That gets blown up. She joins Finn and AJ. Gets blown up. And, the thing about Liv is people have wanted stuff with Liv to work so badly. When Bray Wyatt was doing his thing as The Fiend. Before he was even doing his thing as The Fiend. When he was just Bray Wyatt, and he was talking about Sister Abigail, there was a groundswell that wanted Liv Morgan to be Sister Abigail. Because they want Liv doing this. They want Liv in a position of prominence, and they want Liv to have something that people can sink their teeth into. Anytime she's paired with anybody, you see people saying, I want this to be the thing. I want this to be the permanent thing. Rhea and Liv Morgan together. People were like, oh my God, this is everything. This is everything. She joined Finn Balor and AJ Styles for one match, maybe two. And people are like, oh, this has to be the new Bullet Club. And Liv Morgan as their third. This is going to be fantastic. I want this to be a faction forever. And it's because of Liv. It's because fans want to see Liv Morgan succeed. And that's why she got the reaction that she did at Money in the Bank. Not only when she won, but when she cashed in. You could hear them when she came down the aisle. And when she actually got the pin, my God, the reaction that she got. And that reaction continues on Monday Night Raw when she comes out and cuts the promo and everybody's on her side. And then they put her in that tag team match, and Bianca Belair is her tag team partner. And we are so ready as fans for her to be in that Bianca Belair conversation, for Liv Morgan to breathe that rare air. And then she goes on the bump on Wednesday, and they spend the whole hour with her. And they bring people in. They bring in Sarah Logan. They bring in everybody to send in their video messages and congratulate Liv Morgan. And it is Liv Morgan Appreciation Day on the bump. And nobody watching the bump is going, can we move on to something else? They're all just living in the appreciation and living vicariously through Liv Morgan. And then we go to SmackDown. And Liv is cutting this promo on SmackDown, and Natty's getting involved, and Ronda's getting involved, and all we want to see is Liv Morgan controlling this division. There's not going to be one person in Nashville that wants to see Liv Morgan lose to Ronda Rousey. Not one. It can't happen without Ronda Rousey being the biggest villain in the company. And even with her being the biggest villain in the company, it shouldn't happen at SummerSlam, because people have watched this. People have watched the growth of Liv Morgan. She only gets better. And her passion only feels like it's growing. Nobody, when you look at that history, nobody has more justification to be bitter. And have you ever seen an interview, a tweet, a match, an in-ring segment, a backstage promo where there's even a hint of bitterness from Liv Morgan? Have you ever heard her on a podcast coming across as bitter? Or what do you hear? That contagious laughter, that thing that we all want. Why do we watch wrestling? Because it's fun. Because we're having fun. And that's what we see in Liv. That's why everybody loves her. That's why nobody should be shocked by it. And Liv is the perfect candidate right now to carry that sentiment forward and to take full advantage of it. I mean, it's very rare for somebody to have a sort of innate likability and draw that allows them to just go out there and utilize it and has the result of the audience being on their side. And that's what happens with Liv Morgan. Nothing feels made up. Nothing feels like it was created in a boardroom. Nothing feels marketed. It all feels authentic. And authenticity, when you find it, is just simply not something that you can be trivial about. Authenticity is limited. It's to be taken advantage of when you get it in the best possible way. And I hope that we learn from the story of Liv and see that all of this has led to this support. And that the only thing to do with it is to give Liv this moment. And in giving Liv this moment, what you're doing is you're giving the fans this moment. You're giving every fan that has watched her this moment. It's our moment. And she is that vehicle that gives it to us.
Thanks for listening. Follow at Notsam on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Rate, review, and subscribe. This has been Notsam Wrestling.